Okay, it's time. Yes, it's time to talk about working with Adobe Camera Raw. In this project, we're going to work with Adobe Photoshop CS2 and the new application called Adobe Bridge. Now, there are two ways to access the Adobe Camera Raw utility. The first is to double-click here on an image from within Adobe Bridge. By doing this, it will bring up the Adobe Camera Raw utility, but it brings it up from within Photoshop. Let's cancel from this. This time, let's go back to the Bridge application, and I'm going to hold down the Command key on the Macintosh or the Control key on the PC and the letter R from the keyboard, and this time it brings up the same Adobe Camera Raw application, but this time it is running from within Adobe Bridge. So you have the ability to open up Adobe Camera Raw from within Adobe Bridge or from within Adobe Photoshop. The advantage is, if you're saving a lot of images from within Adobe Camera Raw, as you see here, and you export and save those images, the processing for that will take place in the background, and you have the advantage to move off back to Adobe Photoshop to do work that you may need to get done while that processing is taking place. So my choice is to have all my Camera Raw work done from within Adobe Bridge. To make this as the default, I'm going over here to Bridge, Preferences, and then here within Preferences under the Advanced section, I'm going to click on this checkbox that when I double-click images, they will edit in Camera Raw from within Bridge. I'm now going to click OK. So now when I double-click on an image here in the Adobe Bridge application, it opens up Adobe Camera Raw from within Bridge. As you can see, there's some new features here. Right here in the top, the first one is the Color Sample tool. Next, a Crop tool, a Straighten tool, and of course we have our standard rotation tools, hand tool, and the zoom tool as we had in the past. You also have the ability to preview shadows that are clipping or highlights that are clipping by turning on these checkboxes. This is one way of working within Adobe Camera Raw, but I'm going to show you an incredible new feature. Let's cancel from this. This time I'm going to select a group of images. Clicking this first one, holding down my Shift key, and selecting this last one in a set, I now have a group of selected Camera Raw images. I know by seeing this icon here at the base of each of these images that I have previously applied settings with Adobe Camera Raw. I'd like to remove that alteration at this time. From the Edit menu, I can go down here to Apply Camera Raw Settings, and I would like to go back to the Camera Raw defaults for the selected images. The screen will now update and go back to the actual Camera Raw defaults for these with no correction. Because now I want to go in and correct all of these. I'm going to double click here just on one of the selected group. So here we are in Adobe Camera Raw again. Check this out. All of the images that I selected in Adobe Bridge appear here as thumbnails on the left-hand side. I can move through those with the right arrow key and see each one of them one at a time, and it'll scroll down through all of them. I can also go through here and actually rate these by clicking here within this box. I can increase the number of stars and actually apply different ratings to these images here within Adobe Camera Raw. Now let's get to the actual project. I want to correct these images. I'm going to target this first image, as you see here. All of these images are a little bit underexposed. I'm going to increase the exposure here. I'm also going to move down and adjust my brightness, like this. I might also use here, from the bar at the top, the white balance tool to neutralize this color shade in the background. By clicking in the background, I can then neutralize this background to a nice gray. I can continue on here, adjusting my exposure or my contrast. While I'm making these adjustments, I might also like to turn on this checkbox for highlight clipping warning. Let's turn on the shadow clipping as well as we work on this project. As you see here, the area in red indicates those areas that are being clipped. Now, I want to show you something over here under these tabs, curves. In this project, I want to clean up this background as much as possible to make this background as white as possible. Here within the curves, we can do that. If I hold down the Command key on the Macintosh or the Control key on the PC, I can actually see a small circle appear in my curves window. See that? If I move it, I can see the tone values directly related to that position over the image. I want to put some markers down to indicate those areas that I'd like to adjust and turn to solid white. I also am concerned about her facial tones, so I'm going to leave a marker here so I know where her tones and her face lie within this curve. I want to avoid those. Now, moving back into my image, let's leave another marker down here, like this, and all I'm doing is holding down the Command key on the Macintosh or the Control key on the PC, and then clicking on the image to leave a small little control point here within the custom tone curves. Now all I have to do is adjust these by clicking and dragging them up. As I do this, I'm then increasing the brightness in these highlights near the bottom of the image. Now what if I was concerned about the tones within her face? Moving up here to the top of the Camera Raw dialog, I can select the Color Sampler tool. I can now place in these little markers within the image, which will give me readouts on how the colors change in these assigned areas. I can go back into these and readjust them and move them. Notice the RGB value readouts here. As I make my adjustments, I can be sure that I'm not moving these into areas where I would not want them to go. Let's continue with a little bit more adjustment over here in the curves. My goal was to get rid of some of these shades down to the bottom, but it gives me a really great selective tone adjustment with curves now. We of course can go back to our adjustments here and make additional changes, or into our detail for sharpness, luminance smoothing, and color noise reduction. And of course, as before, you have the chromatic aberration adjustment or vignetting. But in this project, the client has asked us to do something special. They've asked us to crop these images and supply them cropped versions. In fact, they've asked us to crop these to a specific size. Here at the top of the New Camera Raw dialog, I'm clicking and holding on the crop tool. I'm going to choose 5:7 formatted images. I'm going to select that here. Now, when I go in with the crop tool, click and drag, I have an aspect ratio of 5:7. I can go in, click and drag, and readjust the corners like this. I can go into the image area and reposition it, like this. I want a little bit more down here, so I adjust it. Now, we're doing all of this to this first image. We've made all of these tonal corrections and adjustments, and even this crop to this first image in this set. Watch this. Moving up here to the left-hand corner, I'm going to select all, this button here. It's going to select all of the images in this current set that I opened up from Adobe Bridge. Watch this. Synchronize. I can now synchronize all the other images in this selected set based upon the one image with the blue border around it. So now I select Synchronize. And here we have our Synchronize dialog. In this case, I can choose which of these features found in Adobe Camera Raw will be synchronized. In this particular case, I want everything to synchronize. All of the adjustments, even crop, to be synchronized across all of these images. I'm going to click OK. Watch the images on the left-hand side here as they get updated. All of the exposure adjustments have made, and the crop adjustment has been made. If I click on this second image, you'll see that the exact same crop exists with the exact same adjustments and curves applied to it as we had in the first image. Let's assume now that we have completed all of our adjustments here in Camera Raw. There are now several things we could do. If we were to select Done down here in the lower right hand corner, it would then apply all of these changes to these images and bring us back to Adobe Bridge. None of the images would be opened. Now the next thing we could do, we could save these images. We currently have one image selected. If I move up here to the upper left hand corner and select all, notice that we could save all 12 of the images here. If I select Save, we have a new Save Options dialog. We have the ability to export these out in several different formats: the digital negative format, JPEG, TIFF, and Photoshop. Remember I said if we process all of these, the processing will happen in the background and we could move on to Photoshop. This is a great new feature, the ability to export your images directly out of Adobe Camera Raw and into a folder of your choice. We could also just open all 12 of these images by selecting this button here at the base. They would all open up in Adobe Photoshop CS2. The next thing we could do is just export one of these images. Just by selecting it, again this is changed to save just one image. In this particular project, I'm just going to select Done, and let's go back to the Adobe Bridge. Watch the crop and adjustments being made to each of these images. So the preview of these reflects not only the adjustments, but the cropping. And remember, it's a non-destructive crop. We can go back into any one of these at any time and reposition this crop for any unique repositioning or size adjustments, or do any adjustments here that might be specific to any one of these images and select Done. And now that adjustment has been made to only that image. You have just seen some amazing new capabilities with the new Adobe Camera Raw utility.